of 1,000 songs. And it goes right in my pocket.
Failure of the future has to be a nation that is agile, that is innovative, that is creative.
Welcome to Future², the podcast all about innovation in the enterprise, brought to you and run by Collective Campus, an innovation hub based in Australia that works with companies to help them adopt the mindset, methodologies and tools to successfully explore new business models and disruptive innovation in an era of rapid change. For more information, go to www.collectivecamp.us. And without further ado, here's today's podcast. Welcome back to Future², everyone. Today, I'll be bringing you Garrett Dunham. He's an entrepreneur, speaker, and startup advisor. He's founded 2 accelerators, including Prebacked, a reverse hackathon connecting corporates with startups. He's also been instrumental in helping establish the Singulairty University Labs. His work has been featured in the New York Times, the NBC, Fast Company, Forbes, TechCrunch, and VentureBeat. So with that, it gives me great pleasure to bring you the Silicon Valley native, a lover of teaching people entrepreneurship, Garrett Dunham. Welcome to the show, Garrett.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
No worries, man. It's a pleasure to have you here. So before we got started, we were just talking about the San Francisco Giants. I know they struggled to make the playoffs last season despite having a pretty good record.
Yeah, they've won the World Series every other year, and one of my favorite tweets, maybe this is just because I'm a big fan, was I said, well, you can't go to a World Series parade every year, just every other year.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping for another every other year this year.
Well, that makes sense, man. I mean, every other year is good enough for me. And as some of my audience members know, I'm a Phoenix Suns fan. I don't think we've made the playoffs for about 6 years in the NBA. So every other year sounds good, man. Every other year sounds good. All right, let's. I have a tendency to go into professional sports and sometimes spend the first 5-6 minutes doing that, but we are short on time today, so let's just get down to business. You founded Prebacked, which was a reverse hackathon and incubator, if you will, hosted by, basically you hosted pre-incubation programs, which essentially got large enterprise and Fortune 500 companies to pitch their problems they were facing to early-stage startup teams rather than the other way around. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about Prebacked and how it all came about?
Yeah. I think to answer that question of how it all came about, that was born a lot by or at least the spark of an idea was by a venture capitalist friend of mine. And really, I forget the exact idea that it was originally. Mm-hmm. He and I both admit that it was terrible, but this goes to show that the idea wasn't what was as important as having something to aim towards. So I think that we wanted to do, VCs were pitching things that they would like to fund.
Right.
Well, that evolved. We actually ended up with a couple of corporate executives on that panel who, when they came to Silicon Valley, their mind just absolutely was blown. They said, I don't know what I just saw, but I need to participate in this. Silicon Valley is way more innovative and interesting than I thought it would be. Mm-hmm. From there, we started just kicking around. Like, what are your needs? What are your problems? What are your challenges? And from there, it was pretty clear that, a lot of people in the startup world will say, big corporates, they're slow, they're stodgy, and just rip on them, right? Mm-hmm. And in fact, I was just sitting down with the founder of Health 2.0, which has got about 90 chapters across the globe, right before our meeting. And even he was saying that, innovation, like maybe we just source innovation. Well, a lot of the people that we'd work with, the corporations, and specifically the innovation teams within those, they knew the players, right? It wasn't something special to be able to source a team faster. What was the secret sauce was that we would first source teams that were interested in those challenges and then help them to evolve into something that would actually be fundable. Right. And when I say fundable, I mean, have a product that their partner could buy.
Yeah.
So that was Prebacked. That was ended up turning into a bit of an accelerator, specifically focused on corporate contracts and helping to bridge that kind of divide of, hey, I've got 3 months to live, and you've got a 2-year procurement process. How can we meet in the middle?
Yeah, that's a funny one. And, we've worked with companies who engage us for the purposes of moving quicker, but then we have to deal with like a 2 or 3 month procurement process just to get an engagement letter over the line, by which point the world's moved on. Today things move so quickly, and it is a bit of a dance trying to get corporates to work with startups. But you mentioned something interesting there about finding teams who, I suppose are quite interested in the challenge. It's not enough to just say, okay, we've got a problem, let's find some people to solve that problem, but finding the right fit of people who are naturally, they're quite inquisitive and they're very interested about this particular challenge. Maybe it means something to them. As you appreciate people in the startup world, you need resilience, you need passion. Otherwise, money's not enough. It's not going to keep you motivated or determined over a period of 2 to 3 years to get to that traction, right? So, what kind of work did you do to help identify the best fit people for these challenges?
I cheated, in all honesty. What I did was we would actually take these challenges, and our sourcing was based on them. So we said, like one of them would be falls in hospitals. It falls within the hospital walls, is over $1 billion problem in the United States. Mm-hmm. Healthcare in the United States is just absurd. Just the bed sores is almost $1 billion problem. It's ridiculous. Yeah. But we would literally start there and say, look, this is the problem. Mm-hmm. And if you have a solution, or if you have an interest, or you think that your technology could end up evolving that way, mm-hmm. Then apply. And apply to a challenge. Don't apply, open. And in fact, we didn't have a way that you could apply openly. It's like, hey, what challenge fascinates you? Yeah. One of the fascinating things that we found is a lot of the teams would end up merging multiple different challenges mm-hmm. into into a fascinating solution. Mm-hmm. And that one was interesting. I've been doing some work with, I helped Singulairty University launch their startup accelerator. Yeah. They've done some work with Lowe's, and the Oshbot is something worth looking at as really, it's just a beautiful example of a huge organization mm-hmm. and a very, very small startup being able to work together, evolve together. Right. The Oshbot is, gosh, I have some visual slides that are fantastic for this, but it's a robot with a touch screen on the front, mm-hmm. and it's got a screen that almost like Skype. You can see someone talking, mm-hmm. but it's all artificial intelligence. Well, you can ask it, hey, we need screws, we need whatever, and it will take you to that section. It's mm-hmm. cool enough, right? So it's like having a robotic assistant in the shop. Yeah. But some of the things that I found fascinating in this is that by working together with the Lowe's innovation team, mm-hmm. I wish I could remember what their company name is right off the top of my head. But the team that made the Oshbot, they ended up figuring out, well, wait, if we have a screen on the back, mm-hmm. then we could deliver ads at precisely where the items were. Right. So as we're walking to your items, we could actually deliver the ads. Mm-hmm. And then the most fascinating thing is that in the middle of the night, when there's nobody around, Oshbot is doing inventory control, scanning up and down the aisles and seeing how much inventory is available mm-hmm. and how much needs to be restocked in the morning. Was there any theft, things like that. But those were key insights that were found by working together openly. Instead of the startup saying, hey, we've got this screen on wheels that will be your new greeter. Yeah. They said, look, here's where we're starting, but what is the use case? How can we, what's useful? Mm. And really cool insights came out of that.
Right. That's interesting. And on the procurement sort of side with the Oshbot, how long did it take for the team to go from, concept to, say, the first prototype?
I'm trying to think through, because I believe that Lowe's, who owns Orchard Supply, hence mm-hmm. Oshbot, I don't believe that there was a procurement process. I think that team actually had some money that they were able to use to fund innovation. So awesome. I know that they're currently piloting it in one store. My guess, I'm not privy to this information, but my guess is that if I were on either side, I would be using that pilot time to work on procurement. To say, look, we've got data, we've got video, literally, of people being thrilled by this product. It's worth the money. Here's the data that we can show of the inventory control saving dollars. Here's the increase in revenue that we're getting off of the ads. Yeah,
and that's very important, because what we're still seeing in a lot of organizations is, we run an idea contest, we get 100 ideas, and then we have senior management select what they think the best ideas are based on what they think the best ideas are, right? Whereas taking this approach, you've actually got validated learnings. You've got the inventory stock control, you've got videos of excited customers. It kind of speaks for itself. It's a lot easier to get buy-in, and you're more likely to back winning ideas rather than just ideas that we think will actually work.
Right. No, it's absolutely true.
Yeah, so, challenges obviously around procurement. What were some of the other key challenges you found around startups working with these large organizations?
A lot of those challenges were my own. The way that I would, and the way Prebacked would end up helping a startup get usually a six-figure contract with a large organization in healthcare in about 4 months flat. We ended up having to do a lot of the procurement cycle, a lot of the upfront, a lot of the back and forth, all the things that take a lot of time. There was one company, we had a call to discuss our meeting where we'd plan our meeting before we had our meeting.
Yep. I know that story.
and every single one of them got pushed back by a week or more. So it took us 2.5 months just to have the meeting where we said, hey, here's our idea. Yeah.
How do you keep the startup founders or the startup team engaged during that process?
Well, they don't have to do it. So by the time that we would engage with the company, we worked with Cambia, which owns Regents Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's a Pacific Northwest health insurance company, the United States. And by the time we engaged, their senior vice president of government services, literally running a third of the entire business of the company, about $1 billion in revenue, she was on calls weekly with these startups and several people within her organization. And later on, she would make connections to other people in the organization. Yeah. But I would say one key takeaway from our conversation is, without that senior executive who's really bought in, we had unbelievable amounts of problems unless somebody who, preferably has P&L responsibilities, is very high up, very well liked in the organization. Once Lisa, her name's Lisa Brubaker, one of the most amazing executives I've ever met. When she had bought in and she put her force behind it, then mountains moved and things went really quickly. And within 2.5 months, they were offering a contract to a company that they had just barely met, to the tune of 6 figures.
So I guess getting that senior management buy-in is critically important, and it's got to be visible too. It's not just enough for them to say, yeah, we support this, but then everyone below them in the organization doesn't really realize that they support it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So say a startup team went through this process, they've solved a problem, they've got some metrics, it's working well. How do they communicate that back to the organization? Obviously, large companies, generally, when it comes to traditional metrics, we're looking at net present value, return on investment. But with startups, we're looking at learning metrics, innovation metrics. How did you kind of bridge that gap to support that ongoing or subsequent investment in our concept?
It's a good question. We ended up not doing a lot around there. Interestingly, though, when I started polling our own customers and even potential customers about like what metrics do they want to use, Lisa was a great example.
Right.
This is probably not indicative of very many organizations. But said, well, what was the KPIs and like ideas behind why'd you back us, right? Why'd you give us money? Just really would help my sales strategy for other companies.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, there were no KPIs. Like, it was cheap enough, and tens of thousands of dollars, by the way.
Yeah.
It's cheap enough that we figured that, if it didn't work, it'd be we'll chalk it up to an executive retreat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then for the startups, I was actually surprised when several organizations said, we really don't want them trying to pitch, their KPIs and their ROIs and all this stuff to us because we know that they're BS. Yeah. We know that they're not going to be real. And that's, they're just going to bucket themselves like every other vendor. And if we want to work with when they would work with our startups specifically, the whole idea was we were going to help tailor a company to our specific needs so we can give them a ton of money as a customer. Well, in that instance, they really didn't want a startup to look like a typical vendor. Right. Because once you did, it's like, oh, well, this company has no revenue. This company has 5 people. This is insane. Yeah. Just kill it. Yeah. And the corporate antibodies would just slaughter it. So they actually asked not for, to not have metrics. And if you read the book, which I just finished, Creativity Inc., it's by one of the founders of, have you read it?
Yeah, Ed Catmull, right?
Yep, yep. He speaks about the necessity to protect the baby, right, the initial seed of an idea early. And at some point, yes, it does need to live up to the rigors of, what are the metrics. But I feel that especially with working with a startup, if you focus too much on what that ROI is going to be early, it's going to, metrics are critically important, but the right metrics are what's really critically important, right? Yeah,
exactly. We spoke with Ben Yoskowitz, who wrote Lean Analytics a few weeks ago, and he was talking about the whole concept of the one metric that matters, which at different stages of the product development process, you're going to have different metrics. Early on, it's going to be about validating that customer need, and then it's going to be about, the business model, and then eventually it's about validating what features do people really care about. But, you can't expect to apply what McKinsey calls, Horizon 1 incremental improvement metrics to your disruptive innovation where there are just so many unknowns.
Right.
But I like what you said about, whatever, it's only tens of thousands of dollars if, we'll just put it down to some kind of executive retreat, right? But it's so true. I think there's a misconception that taking, say, the lean startup philosophy or, your Silicon Valley startup approach is fraught with dangers and risks. But in today's climate, the biggest danger is standing still. And, you can easily invest across 10 different ideas for maybe $500,000, which would probably not even begin to scratch the surface compared to some of the other, big transformational projects that can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And the fact is, you need to take a portfolio approach because the risk of things not really panning out are quite high.
Oh, totally. In fact, Disney did something very interesting with that. Now, they went the accelerator route, and I'm going to plead with all of your listeners not to create an accelerator because there's very little need left in the world for more accelerators. Back some of the good ones and participate with them. But with that said, Disney ended up working with Techstars, I believe, and they sourced a number of startups. One of them was Sphero. Are you familiar with this company?
Sphero?
Yeah, so it's a little spherical toy that drives around. There's internal motors, so it doesn't actually look like it's anything other than a giant bouncy ball, but it drives around, right?
Right.
This company was backed by Google, went through their accelerator. If you look at it and then look at BB-8, there's a lot of similarity for good reason.
Right.
What they ended up doing was they took this technology. Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, saw an ability to create a drone in the movies out of this, right? So then they create a drone. This Sphero company raises their Series C. They get a ton of money out of it in investment. But also, I haven't looked up the numbers. I believe it was $22 million in revenue was expected for the Sphero BB-8, or sorry, the BB-8 version of this company's product to be sold, right around the time of Star Wars. So Disney was able to source technology that the CEO himself saw a future in. Yeah. He backed it and put a lot of effort into it. It goes to that executive, having that executive have real buy-in. And then they put it into their movie, blow out the revenue for the startup, which means that their investment just doubled in size or more based on the fact that they were participating. Yeah. So it becomes a little bit difficult. A lot of corporate innovation arms, corporate VCs can crush a startup too early. Yeah. But if you can do it really right, Disney and a lot of large organizations have the capital to be the largest client and to essentially prove out their own investment by saying, we believe in this, so we invested in it and use it. And now they have a bunch of revenue. Yeah. And now because they have revenue, they can raise subsequent rounds, their valuation shoots up. So our investment comes back to us.
And that's, what you're talking about there is about that sort of strategic alignment between the investor and the startup. And, in that case, the startup essentially becomes a customer. And because it becomes a customer, the revenue goes up, the valuation goes up, and everybody's happy. Whereas I think there appears to be a tendency in some cases of large organizations just kind of diversifying across all kinds of ideas, which is great. Diversification is a good thing, but if I'm a telecommunications company and I'm investing in bicycles, it's kind of hard to picture a strategic fit where I can help that bicycle company, grow. So I think that's a critical point. So once startups have gone through this process, what did you see in terms of next steps? Did corporates look to simply partner with the startup? For example, like what you've just alluded to. Did they look to acquire and integrate? Did they look to invest in the startup a little bit further? What were some of the next steps that you saw?
Yeah, the next steps are a little bit. Sorry, the feedback. The next steps were a bit harder because we ended up, my partner and I had a bit of a falling out right around the time that there came be a deal, which was the one that was working the best. When they started offering a contract, the team that they offered a contract to ended up acquired by IBM fairly soon afterwards. And, a lot of issues came down to things still moving slowly. But, there was talk of, actually I'm thinking through Wellmark, there's talk of wanting to invest in the startup as well as being having the startup be a vendor. And that was what seemed to make a lot of sense for a lot of different organizations. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense, Garrett. And just one last thing I wanted to touch on the pre-back side of things was around, obviously speed is fundamental to success when it comes to that early stage, innovation. And so how critical is it, in your opinion, that large companies who perhaps do have that slow-moving sort of bureaucracy engage with startups rather than your traditional incumbents when they're looking to develop new products?
Oh boy! I actually tell startups now that they should stay away from large organizations.
Okay.
And that's mostly because very few of them have, very few that I've seen have had the culture and the ability to move fast enough. To put yourself in a startup shoes, you've got 3 months of money left in your bank account. Yeah. You have nothing coming in. Yeah. You're working 100+ hours a week. Yeah. And you're not exactly sure if you're going to survive or not. Mm-hmm. You've got option A, which is go after things that might take a month, go after companies that might take a month to make a decision mm-hmm. and to give you small amounts of revenue to keep you going. Mm-hmm. Or you've got option B where, I mean, realistically, most organizations I've talked to take 9 months to get a deal. Mm-hmm. But let's say it takes only 3. Well, do you go after the one that if it works, you've got enough money for the next 3 years, mm-hmm. but if it doesn't, you're dead? Or do you go after the ones that, that make more sense? So I think really a large organization needs to look pretty introspectively. And I mean, the bulk of what I would do mm-hmm. was really for Prebacked. It was really around laying that foundation, getting the right people in the room, getting them ready, making sure everybody was ready to move quickly, having a nice framework where, collaboration could happen, and then just going for it. Yeah. If you can't do that, you are not ready to talk to a startup. You're more likely to kill them than to help them. Yeah. And that doesn't really benefit anyone, right?
Well, 100%, man. And I think we touched on this before the call. You need that alignment of values. If I'm a corporate employee, chances are I've got a pretty comfortable paycheck. It comes in every week. My hunger levels aren't as high. My desire, my drive may not be as high as someone who has, say, 3 months runway, living on absolute minimum and working 14 hours a day. And you've got this dream that you just need to make happen. Otherwise, your business closes its doors. And so it's important that, I suppose, like you've alluded to, that startups understand corporates, but corporates also understand startups if they are to engage with them and actually come up with some sort of valuable outcomes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I should say that there are a lot of organizations where people are very driven. Large organizations where they are very driven. Mm-hmm. I'm working at Singulairity. It really helped shape my view coming from startup land mm-hmm. of these big, stodgy, slow-moving beasts. It's not as true as I thought. Yeah. And in fact, to a large degree, it's, you got a lot of driven people. Sometimes the bureaucracy can stifle it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, egos. Sometimes I'm not sure. I've grown to respect the people who work within large organizations, and especially the ones that are willing to say, look, we know we need to innovate. Yeah. We need to do it smart and focused, but at the same time, creativity, you can't just invent creativity. Yeah. You need to let it sort of mature. Mm-hmm. And
it's not something you can just run a brainstorming session on. Let's get together for an hour and brainstorm. We're going to come up with the next big thing.
Yeah. It's a book that I'd highly recommend. This was actually recommended to me by, I forgot his name off the top of my head. Very prominent Silicon Valley guy. But
thanks, man.
Horrible intro. Let me see if but it's called If You Want to Write.
Right.
And very little book. It's not. I mean, it's about writing, but I think that it expands into the whole creative process very well. And it's just fascinating. It's one that Guy Kawasaki. There we go. I knew that would relate to the top sooner or later. That was one of 3 books that he recommended when he spoke to us over at Singulairity.
Yeah. Well, he's also Chief Evangelist Officer now of an Australian startup called Canva, who you'd probably be familiar with. So they're doing wonderful things. But and on the topic of those corporate entrepreneurs who are willing to push the boundaries, I think Steve Blank recently wrote that he has huge respect for them. They're kind of like these warriors who have to deal with so much bureaucracy, but somehow they manage to just navigate all the the minefield that is a corporate and actually deliver outcomes. It's obviously a lot harder to do that from within a large organization than from outside. So definitely much kudos to the guys that can do it internally. I've got a few friends in that space who are trying to push the boundaries. and it definitely requires a massive level of resilience and just drive. So you're definitely right there. We are running out of time, so I want to touch on your project you're working on around productivity. I thought I had written the name down, but it is not here. You want to remind our audience what you're working on?
Well, I mean, I did some work on productivity, and I'm a big fan of it. I wrote a small ebook about how to called Brutally Productive. And I actually haven't published it, so sorry, you won't be able to see it. But I haven't published it yet. Actually, my focus now is on behavioral change and helping people to install or eliminate habits in a single weekend. Right. And some of this does touch back on productivity in that, I mean, if you want the habit of going to the gym every day, or which, by the way, massively improves productivity. Good. Richard Branson said that he attributes exercise to 4xing the amount of productive time he has in a day.
Couldn't agree more, man. It's an interesting one. You talk about habits. I recently heard a podcast with Tom Ziglar, Zig Ziglar's son. And he was talking about how he was down in Melbourne for a conference and someone put him on the spot and said, what's the quickest way to success? And he said the first thing that came to mind, which was replace bad habits with good habits. And then he thought about it a little bit more and he said, wow, that's actually quite powerful. And I recently put together a list of about 20 bad habits. Okay, what can I replace this with? And I've been doing that for a little while. And it does have a profound effect on just not only your productivity, but just your well-being and the way you see the world. It's really, really powerful stuff to just take a step back and be a bit more introspective and say, hey, how can I get better?
I would highly recommend BJ Fogg's work in this realm. He's a Stanford researcher does a lot on habits. Tiny Habits is a free weekly course that he gives that it's just based on email, and I did it. Liked it a lot. Ended up figuring out a lot of what he taught long before going through the course. But things like have a small, for example, for 7 years I wanted to get back to the gym. I'd gone regularly for about 6 hours a week for about a year, and then I just fell off. 7 years, kept making big plans, big ideas. And this can come back to our talk in a lot of ways too, here's the big, fully thought out plan, right? Yeah. Which never works. Yeah. And for me, not one time out of the, 5 or 6 attempts when I had a full, this is what I'm going to do on day 1, this is day 2, this is day 3, I'm going to do this many reps of these different exercises. Yeah. 0 times. What worked is I said, you know what? I'm going to go to the gym for 5 minutes.
Hey, 5 minutes is 5 minutes.
And then I said, I knew if I go for 5 minutes, I'm going to go again. I'm going to stay there for longer than 5, right? Yeah. But this goes back to BJ Fogg's philosophy of tiny habits. Said you want to have the habit of flossing, floss 1 tooth, and then be proud of yourself afterwards. And better yet, do it based on a trigger so that you can outsource this into your basal ganglia, into your core brain. Yeah. What that comes to in productivity is you can figure out what is that one metric that matters. What is the one thing that you should be doing right now? And preferably something that you can control. It teaches to entrepreneurs. Let's say it was you want more customers, right? The one thing that you can control is how many you reach out to. You can't control how many respond back. You can obviously optimize, and you should. But let's say that you talk to or email 100 people a day, 50 people a day, 10 people a day, whatever it is, and you do that consistently, you can figure out your funnel. How many emails does it take to get one conversation? Does it take to get one conversion?
That's right.
Well, great. Now you have something that you personally can do. And if you marry that with the tiny habits, then let's go back to the email example. You need to increase sales. Great. Right after you come back from lunch, you'll sit down and send one email to one customer. and then be very proud of yourself for it. That reward is key.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, that becomes outsourced, right? You know the one thing that you need to do. Sadly, I'm trying to think of how to apply this to a larger organization, and because I don't have the experience working in larger organizations, it's a little tougher for me to empathize. But it's the same thing, right? Like, realistically, will sending out, responding to 10 emails progress your career as much as putting forth a thoughtful memo on how you can improve a process or how you can grow revenue or what have you?
Yeah. It's that whole urgent v important thing, right? Going back to Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We spend too much time focusing on what's urgent, what needs to be done right now, and not stepping back and focusing on the important stuff that will help us get better and deliver better outcomes. So we have 3 minutes before my next podcast guest this morning, Garrett. So what I want to wrap up with is 3 questions that I ask all my guests about, so 2 hypotheticals and 1 on lifestyle design. And we've sort of touched on lifestyle design now, but firstly, I want to ask you, and pretend you're not an entrepreneur and you have to work for a company. So if you could work for a company at any stage of their company life cycle, who would it be and why? IDEO. Awesome. Like it.
Why? Because I've been a little disenchanted with them more lately, but in terms of their mission and what they do, I just love the cutting edge of innovation. So IDEO fascinates me.
Makes perfect sense to me, man. Second question is, if you could ask anyone a question, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask?
Oh. Well, this is probably going to be a trite answer, but I think I'd ask Abraham Lincoln. And he is famous for putting together a team that of A players who all did not get along very well. Mm-hmm. And I would love to know, what was it like to be part of that team, and how did he keep them as a cohesive unit?
Great answer. And I think that definitely applies to corporate teams who are looking to get marketing, finance, sales, product, all to speak the same language. And I think you're the 4th guy who's said Abraham Lincoln, so seems to be a common thread. And finally, lifestyle design. So I like to ask people how they keep on top of their games. Do they have any rituals, any routines? And obviously you go to the gym. Is there anything else you do to kind of stay on top of your game?
I've outsourced most of it to the basal ganglia. In the morning, I get up at 5:15 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a morning person at all.
Right.
In fact, I jokingly say I'm stupid until about 10 or 11. But I use my alarm as a trigger, jump out of bed, and immediately start running through my routine. And by the time that I come conscious, I'm halfway done with my morning routine, and it's like, well, great. I can almost go to work now.
Fantastic, man. Look, great answers. Great podcast. Enjoyed talking to you today. Unfortunately, I have to go, but I would have loved to have gone for another 15, 20 minutes, but that is the nature of the game today. So where can our audience go to find out a little bit more about you, Garrett?
GarrettDunham.com, 2 R's, T's. Yep. You can find out about me, or urgeless.com, and you can find out about how we're using VR to tackle porn addiction.
Well, fantastic. I look forward to reading about that. I will also put that in the show notes for all our listeners. Otherwise, thanks again, man. Enjoy your night.
All right, you too. Take care. Thanks.
Cheers. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that chat with Garrett Dunham. I had a great time chatting to him about all things corporate innovation, startups, and also lifestyle design towards the end there. If you're looking to find out a little bit more about our podcast or about Collective Campus, you can do so at collectivecamp.us. If you're enjoying our podcast, it would mean so much to the team here if you would like, share, or subscribe, or all 3 if you really want to, if you're a massive advocate, on either iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. Don't forget, we've recently released the Innovation Manager's Handbook, which you can also download for free at theinnovationmanagershandbook.com. Until next time, Future² out.